The blizzard had swallowed the mountain road whole, turning the Christmas Eve world into a white desert where sound died before it reached the ear. Agent Daniel Cross gripped the steering wheel of his FBI-issued SUV as wind lashed at the windows, the snowstorm blurring the landscape into a shapeless, swirling void. He was a man built for harsh conditions. Tall, strong-shouldered, lean from years in the field, with storm-gray eyes that rarely betrayed emotion. His dark brown hair, cut short in a military-style trim, and the faint stubble along his jaw gave him a rugged look that matched the brutal weather outside. But tonight, despite his calm exterior, there was a heaviness in his chest he couldn't quite explain, a weight that felt older than grief itself. Beside him sat Hunter, his 4-year-old German Shepherd K9 partner. Hunter's sable black and gray coat bristled slightly as the wind howled. The dog's golden brown eyes scanned the white horizon, pupils narrowing with each new gust. Hunter was massive, 90 pounds of muscle, discipline, and uncanny intuition. His harness bore the words Hunter K9 Unit, and even in the dim light, Daniel could see the faint scar on Hunter's left ear, a reminder of the night they survived a cartel ambush together. Hunter was loyal, fearless, and almost too perceptive for a mere dog. "Easy, boy," Daniel muttered, though Hunter hadn't made a sound. The dog simply stared into the blizzard as if trying to read something hidden within it. Daniel slowed when headlights splintered against a shape further down the hill. It wasn't until he rolled to a stop that he realized it was a truck. No, more specifically, a pickup overturned at the base of an icy slope, its underside exposed like some wounded animal. Snow clung to the shattered windows, the tires still spinning weakly as if refusing to accept their fate. Daniel's breath tightened. An accident on a road like this. The odds of survival were almost zero. He stepped out into the storm, cold slicing at his face. Hunter leapt down beside him, paws sinking into the deep snow. Daniel approached the wreck carefully, sweeping his flashlight across the scene. He found the driver, a man in his 40s, slumped against the ceiling of the overturned cab, unmoving, pale, the cold already claiming his skin. A woman lay beside him, her dark hair frozen into the glass, an arm stretched out as if shielding something that was no longer there. No signs of life. No pulse. Daniel exhaled through his nose, slow and controlled, yet something inside him twisted. He had seen death in many forms, but accidents on lonely winter roads always felt crueler somehow. No witnesses, no final words, just cold swallowing everything. Hunter suddenly stiffened. The dog's ears, always alert, snapped upward with such force that snow shook off like dust. "What is it?" Daniel whispered. Hunter didn't bark. He didn't growl. Instead, he turned his head sharply toward Dia, a cluster of rocks near the tree line. A shadowed crevice carved into the hill where the snow curled in thick, wind-blown drifts. Then came the sound. A noise so faint Daniel thought it was the wind at first. Soft, broken, like the world's smallest heartbeat escaping into the storm. A squeak, a whimper, a desperate, trembling chip. Daniel froze. That was no wind. He followed Hunter toward the crevice, every breath releasing pale clouds into the frigid air. The snow crunched beneath his boots as he knelt beside the rocks. His flashlight beam cut through the white haze and illuminated a tiny, trembling shape, partially buried under powdery snow. Daniel's breath caught. It wasn't a kitten. It wasn't a puppy. It wasn't even a creature he immediately recognized. The thing was barely the size of his palm, its thin black fur soaked and clinging to skin so cold it bordered on purple. Its ribs trembled with every fragile breath, Its limbs were tiny twigs, its ears too soft, too curled, and its eyes, oversized, wet, glassy, reflected Daniel's face like dark mirrors filled with fear. "Oh God," Daniel whispered, reaching into the crevice. The creature let out another faint squeak, a sound that vibrated with raw desperation. Its tiny claws hooked weakly onto his glove, as if pleading not to be left. Hunter, towering over the little being, lowered his head. Instead of barking, the dog leaned in, sniffed the creature once, then stepped back with a low rumble. Not aggression, but something Daniel had rarely heard from him before. A warning? A recognition? A feeling? Whatever it was, Hunter sensed something Daniel couldn't. Daniel carefully lifted the creature, its weight so light it felt like lifting a handful of feathers. He unzipped his black FBI jacket and slipped the trembling being inside, holding it against his chest to share whatever warmth he could. "You're freezing," he murmured. "Hang on. Just hang on." As he hurried back toward the vehicle, snow stinging his face, the creature curled tighter against him, its tiny breath brushing the fabric of his charcoal shirt. Its claws, too small to hurt, too desperate to let go, pressed gently into Daniel's skin. In that moment, something cracked open inside him, something he had buried deep since the night he lost his daughter. This creature, this helpless speck of life, had bared its soul to him with a single act of trust. And Daniel, for reasons he couldn't name, felt responsible in a way that went beyond duty. Hunter kept glancing at Daniel and the bundle hidden inside his jacket, golden brown eyes flicking between worry and instinctive protectiveness. Daniel noticed. "You feel it too, don't you?" he asked softly. Hunter didn't answer, but his posture spoke volumes. As Daniel buckled back into the SUV, his gloved hands trembling slightly, he dared to peek inside the jacket. The small being looked up at him again, its eyes glossy with pain, the kind of pain no creature should ever endure alone. "Where did you come from?" Daniel whispered. "And why were you out there?" The creature squeaked faintly. So faintly, Daniel leaned closer. Was it answering? No, he was imagining it. He had to be. Creatures this small didn't understand. They reacted, they survived, but they didn't choose. Yet, this one had chosen him. As Daniel started the engine, Hunter suddenly stiffened again, staring through the blizzard toward the crash site. His fur rose along his spine. For the first time in years, Daniel heard a low, worried whine from the normally fearless dog. What now? Daniel followed Hunter's gaze. And then Daniel saw it. Inside the overturned truck, where the dead woman's hand still reached outward in eternal protection, something moved. Or rather, something had been moved, the snow shifting in a way that didn't match the storm's rhythm. Something had been there moments ago. Something big enough to crawl away. Daniel's heart jolted. Hunter growled at the darkness, and the creature inside Daniel's jacket trembled violently, as if remembering something far worse than the cold. The storm roared, swallowing the sound. Daniel drove. The road back felt treacherous, slick ice beneath spinning tires, but Daniel's focus never left the fragile life breathing shallowly against him. The creature's body convulsed once, and Daniel nearly stopped the car in fear. But then the tiny chest rose again, weak, barely there, but alive. "You're safe now," he promised, though he didn't fully believe it. Something about that overturned truck had unsettled him in a way training never prepared him for. A strange tension lingered in his gut, a whisper that kept repeating, "That creature should not have survived the crash." Hunter pressed against Daniel's arm, warm and steady. He was usually calm during crises, but tonight he was restless, pulling his gaze from the storm only to glance at the bundle under Daniel's jacket. "Yeah," Daniel murmured. "I know. Something's wrong." When they reached the outskirts of town, Daniel didn't head to the station. He didn't call it in. Something, instinct, fear, or maybe the faint warmth of the tiny being in his jacket, told him this wasn't a case to throw into official channels just yet. This was different, fragile. And when the creature lifted one frail limb and touched his chest through the fabric, Daniel felt the smallest spark of something he hadn't felt in years. Hope, or fate, or perhaps something he didn't dare name. He pulled into his driveway, the storm raging behind him, and whispered, "I've got you. I'm not letting you die out there." Hunter nudged his leg as he stepped inside, the warm glow of home closing around them. Daniel didn't know it yet, but the moment he found that creature, Snowdrop, though he had yet to give it a name, his life had already begun to change. And somewhere in the storm outside, unseen eyes watched the house with interest. If you believe in miracles, compassion, or the way God guides us to those who need us most, please like, comment, and subscribe to Angels in Uniform. Your support keeps these stories alive. The front door slammed shut behind Daniel as the storm howled outside, flinging snow against the windows like handfuls of broken glass. His home was modest, a quiet cabin on the outskirts of Silver Ridge, dimly lit with warm lamps and cluttered with old case files and traces of a life lived mostly in silence. Yet tonight, the silence felt different, less comforting, more watchful. The creature hidden in his jacket needed warmth desperately, and Daniel moved quickly, shedding his black tactical FBI coat and placing the tiny being onto a folded, heated blanket he kept near the fireplace. For a moment, he simply hovered over it, afraid to blink, afraid that the fragile rise and fall of its chest might stop. Hunter, the 4-year-old German shepherd with his thick, sable black and gray fur and powerful build, paced in slow circles, sniffing the air with a tension Daniel recognized instantly. Hunter's golden brown eyes never left the creature. His tail was still, his muscles taut. He wasn't aggressive, but he wasn't calm either. Something between instinct and unease flowed through him. "Easy," Daniel said softly, though the command was more for himself. He knelt beside the blanket and gently brushed away the melting snow clinging to the creature's fur, revealing skin so thin and delicate it almost glowed under the warm light. The tiny body shivered violently, as if cold still clung to its bones. Daniel warmed his palms and cupped them around the creature, radiating heat. Slowly, the trembling softened. But then he saw it clearly for the first time. Its chest rising with quick, shallow breaths, every breath a trembling question of survival. The creature opened its eyes, those impossibly large glass-like orbs, full of something that didn't belong to an animal. Fear, sadness, memory. It made a small sound, a squeak, but too soft, too shaped to be mere instinct. It sounded painfully close to a muffled whimper. Daniel swallowed. "What happened to you out there?" He draped a soft cloth over its tiny form, and it instinctively gripped the corner with minuscule claws, holding on with surprising strength. That instinctual cling pierced him deeper than he expected. His chest tightened with an ache he thought he had buried with his daughter years ago. A child who clutched his finger the same way, moments before slipping away in a sterile hospital room he rarely let himself remember. Hunter approached cautiously, lowering his massive head to sniff the creature again. And then it happened. The tiny being froze, its breath stopping entirely for a full, terrifying second. its body rigid under Daniel's hand. Hunter immediately backed away, ears flattening as if respecting the creature's fear. "It's okay," Daniel whispered, brushing a thumb along its fragile side. "He won't hurt you." The creature made another sound, this time longer, shakier, like the whimper of a newborn losing warmth. Daniel fetched a small bottle of warm milk, the kind he kept for rescue pets from previous cases. Carefully, he touched the bottle's tip to the creature's lips. It hesitated, then latched on with unexpected urgency. Daniel exhaled in relief. "You've got fight in you," he murmured. Hunter settled on the carpet, lying down but keeping his head up, watching every movement. Outside, distant sirens wailed against the storm. Ambulances, likely reaching the overturned truck. But Daniel knew no one had survived. No one except the impossible life trembling on his blanket. As the creature fed, its breathing steadied. But Daniel noticed something else. Its ears twitched at every sound in the house. Not like a dog or cat, but like something constantly listening for footsteps from a world it once belonged to. And each time Hunter shifted his weight or the wind rattled the window, the tiny being pressed itself tighter into Daniel's hand. Gradually, its eyelids drooped, heavy with exhaustion. Daniel lowered it carefully onto the heated blanket, arranging the cloth around it like a nest. It took one last sip of air and curled into a trembling ball. He watched it for a quiet moment, his chest tightening with something he hadn't felt in years. Hope? Fear? Purpose? He wasn't sure. Then it happened. Just as he pulled his hand away, the creature emitted a sound. Not the squeak from before, not the soft whine of cold, but a tiny, broken hum that seemed to carry intention. A sound eerily close to the little gasp his daughter used to make when she was afraid of the dark. Daniel froze. His breath hitched. The room suddenly felt smaller. "That's impossible," he whispered. The creature repeated the sound. Softer this time, but unmistakably similar. A tone he knew better than his own heartbeat. Something inside him cracked wide open. Hunter stood abruptly, tail stiff, ears pointed sharply toward the front door. His entire body locked into an alert stance, the kind he reserved only for danger approaching. His lips didn't curl into a growl, but his chest rumbled with a low vibration that traveled through the floor. "What is it now?" Daniel whispered. Hunter didn't budge. His golden eyes were fixed not at the door itself, but at the gap beneath it, where a faint draft slipped in from the storm. The creature suddenly shivered violently, its tiny body pressing into the blanket as though trying to disappear. Daniel felt its fear pulse against his fingertips. Then, just for an instant, the living room lights flickered. A gust of wind roared outside, but Daniel felt it differently. Not just a storm. Something else. Something searching. Hunter growled deep and roared louder than before, stepping between Daniel and the door as though shielding him from whatever waited beyond. "That truck," Daniel murmured. Something else was there. Something that got away. The lights calmed. Hunter didn't. The creature whimpered again, the same tone as before. Soft, pleading, haunting. Daniel held it close without thinking. "What are you?" he whispered. "And what are you running from?" The moment passed, but the unease stayed behind, like a shadow refusing to leave the room. Daniel forced himself to focus on warmth, on keeping the creature alive through the night. He warmed more milk, cleaned its delicate fur, and tucked it tight against the heated blanket. Each time he tried to step away, the creature's claws flexed weakly, reaching for him. "You're okay," he whispered. "You're safe here." But the truth was, he wasn't certain. The strange movement he'd seen near the overturned truck, Hunter's heightened alertness, the creature's terror, none of it made sense. Not yet. Hours passed. The storm howled. And for the first time since his daughter's death, Daniel found himself sitting beside something he couldn't walk away from. Near midnight, after the creature finally fell into a deeper sleep, Daniel allowed himself to lean back against the couch, exhaustion creeping in. His eyes fluttered shut for only a moment. Then the creature stirred and made that impossible sound again. The same whisper of a child who never got the chance to grow. Daniel's eyes snapped open. His throat tightened. Memories he had buried rushed in like icy water. He blinked quickly, steadying his breath, refusing to fall apart. Not yet. He looked down at the tiny creature. It lay curled, small enough to fit in a single palm, its chest rising and falling in fragile rhythms. He touched its side gently. "We'll figure this out," Daniel whispered. "Whatever you are, whatever happened to you, you're not alone anymore." Hunter shifted closer, resting his heavy head on Daniel's knee. In Hunter's eyes, Daniel saw the unspoken truth they both sensed. The storm outside was only the beginning of something much larger, something waiting to reveal itself. For now, all Daniel could do was protect the fragile life fate had dropped into his hands on this cruel Christmas night. And somewhere in the storm, an unseen echo answered the creature's tiny hum, carried across the snow like a whisper. If you believe every life is guided by God's hand and no soul is found by accident, please like, comment, and subscribe to Angels in Uniform. The storm met Daniel like a living wall as soon as he stepped out of the ranger outpost. Wind clawed at his face, driving needles of snow beneath his hood. And for a moment he wondered if walking into this was brave or foolish. The baby was tucked against his chest, wrapped beneath his tactical FBI jacket, her tiny warmth pressed over his heart. He felt her faint movements, soft flutters, reminding him that every step he took now carried a life too small to even hold up its own head. Behind him, Lena Moore clung to his sleeve. She was thin, unsteady, her long brown hair whipping like tangled ribbon in the wind. Her pale cheeks were flushed, and her blue-green eyes darted around with the raw fear of someone who had been running far too long. Hunter moved ahead, taking the lead. The German shepherd's sable black and gray coat gathered snow instantly, and the faint scar on his left ear stood out under the tiny lantern glow. Every muscle in his body was coiled, ready, listening. At the edge of the porch, all three of them stopped. The footprints were still there. 3 sets, clear, crisp, leading straight to the cabin, and stopping. Not a single track showing where they could have gone next. It was as if they had stepped out of nothingness and vanished right after. Daniel scanned the dark tree line, his gloved hand hovering near his firearm. "Stay close," he said quietly. "Behind me." Lena only nodded, her breath trembling. Hunter stepped into one of the prints, testing it. The snow compressed beneath his weight with a soft crunch. He sniffed, deeply, sharply, and then Daniel saw it. A flicker of something in the dog's golden eyes. Not recognition, not aggression, but a strange, instinctive disgust. Hunter exhaled forcefully and shook his head, as if trying to fling off whatever scent had clung to his nose. Daniel's stomach tightened. "Yeah, I don't like it either." They descended into the storm, following a narrow path Daniel knew well, one used by search and rescue teams. Lena stayed close, half leaning on him when the wind shoved at them like a giant hand. "You shouldn't have brought us out," she whispered shakily. That cabin was a target, Daniel replied. They found you once. They'd find you again. They'll find us anywhere, she murmured. She looked down at the baby, her voice breaking. They always do. Daniel adjusted the small body inside his coat. Does she have a name? Lena hesitated, then, barely audible. Emma. Her name is Emma. Daniel nodded. Emma. A real name in the middle of a nightmare. They walked in silence until a sharp crack sliced through the wind. Hunter whipped his head toward the right, growl rising from deep in his chest. Daniel looked up and froze. Between the trees stood a figure. Tall, motionless, outlined for a heartbeat by swirling snow. It did not shiver, did not sway, did not react like a human trying to shield itself from winter. It simply watched. Then the snow gusted harder, and the figure vanished. Daniel lifted his firearm instantly, scanning the trees. I saw someone, he said, 15 yards out, just standing there. Lena's hand squeezed his arm, knuckles white. They don't always follow behind us, she whispered. Sometimes, they're already ahead. Daniel pushed them forward until the dark shape of his SUV appeared between the pines. At first, relief. Then, cold dread. Both front tires were shredded. Rubber curled back like torn petals. The rear windshield spider-webbed outward from a single, precise impact. And on the driver's window, a symbol traced in frost with a gloved finger. A circle, with a diagonal slash. Daniel felt the blood drain from his face. He hadn't seen that symbol in years. Lena saw the shift in his expression. You recognize it, she whispered. Don't you? Daniel swallowed hard. One case. A little girl went missing. Every file connected to her vanished. Databases wiped. Hospital logs rewritten. His voice grew rough. Her father said the same thing you did, that someone erased her. Did you ever find her? Lena asked. Daniel didn't answer. Silence answered for him. Lena held Emma closer. That's what they do, she breathed. Women came into the facility pregnant. Some left without their babies, their charts blank, their IDs replaced, and they called it mercy. Mercy for the burden of remembering. She shuddered. When I learned Emma was selected, I ran. Selected for what? Daniel's voice was low, dangerous. I don't know, she whispered. Just that the wrong people were very interested in her. Interested in what she is, in what she might become. The wind howled, snow hammering their boots. Hunter stepped between Lena and the woods, pressing close to Emma, protective and tense. His hackles rose, breath forming heavy clouds. Daniel knew they couldn't stay. The SUV's gone, he said. They want us trapped. Then what do we do? Lena's voice trembled. We go up the ridge. There's an old fire tower. No roads, no cameras. Lena stared at him. We can't outrun them. Daniel looked down at Emma, sleeping against his chest. Yes, he said quietly. We can. Because they've already made one mistake. What mistake? They let me find you. Hunter barked sharply, as if agreeing, as if promising. They turned toward the mountain. The footprints behind them stayed perfectly formed, untouched by wind, like something wanted Daniel to keep looking back, like something wanted him to know this was far from over. He didn't look back again. He held Emma tighter and stepped into the storm. If you believe God places the right protectors in the right storms, please like, comment, and subscribe to Angels in Uniform. The town's lone veterinary clinic sat at the edge of Silver Ridge, like a stubborn ember that refused to die in the storm. Snow hammered its tin roof, rattling the gutters, and the single neon "Open" sign flickered weakly behind a fogged window. Daniel pushed through the wind with his shoulder, keeping the infant-sized creature, Snowdrop, secured beneath his tactical FBI jacket. The tiny body radiated a fragile warmth against his chest, its breathing light, trembling, as if each inhale was a question it wasn't sure it should ask. Lena stumbled beside him, one hand gripping Daniel's arm for balance. Her long brown hair clung to her face, stiff with frost, and exhaustion bent her thin frame as if years, not hours, had passed since the crash. Hunter led them, his powerful German shepherd form cutting a path through the drifts. Snow clung to his sable fur, and his golden eyes scanned every corner of the street with the hypervigilance of a soldier who trusted nothing anymore. Daniel kicked the clinic door open with his boot and guided Lena inside. A bell chimed weakly overhead. Warmth enveloped them, along with the faint scent of medicine, iodine, and old wood. The lights buzzed softly, illuminating shelves of gauze, syringes, and animal carriers. It looked ordinary, almost comfortingly so, until the man behind the counter lifted his eyes. Dr. Harold Vance was in his mid-50s, tall but stooped from years bent over exam tables. His silver hair was disheveled, his dark eyes ringed with exhaustion. His face carried the quiet sadness of someone who had seen too many creatures arrive broken, too many owners grieving. He wore a rumpled white coat over a gray turtleneck and brown slacks, and his hands, long, steady hands, were scarred with faint burns and old cuts from emergency treatments gone wrong. When he saw Daniel, relief flickered across his features. When he saw Snowdrop peeking from under Daniel's jacket, that relief shattered. "My God," Dr. Vance whispered. What are you carrying?" Daniel opened his jacket gently. Snowdrop blinked up at the fluorescent lights, its enormous watery eyes reflecting the room like a trembling mirror. Its small claws clung to Daniel's shirt with desperate instinct. Vance staggered back a step. His hand covered his mouth. "Where did you find it?" "In a crashed truck," Daniel said. "Down by the East Ridge. Mother's gone, no ID. I didn't know where else to go." Vance swallowed hard. "Bring it here. Carefully." Hunter growled softly, but moved aside as Daniel laid Snowdrop on a metal exam table. The creature whimpered, curling into itself. Vance turned on a lamp and began his examination with trembling hands. He checked the creature's pulse, bones, pupils, temperature. His breath hitched. "This isn't right," he muttered. Daniel stepped closer. "Explain." Vance pointed at the skull shape beneath the thin fur and skin. "I worked 10 years in wildlife trafficking rescue. I've handled hybrids, mutations, smuggled exotics, everything you can imagine. But this shouldn't exist in this region. The cranial ridges don't match canines, felines, marsupials. Nothing I know." He lifted Snowdrop's tiny paw. The claws were curved like needles, frighteningly sharp for something so small. "And these," he said, voice cracking, "are predator claws. But look at the jawline. Too soft, too rounded. A prey species would have this jaw. A hunter would never." Daniel frowned. "So, what is it?" "I don't know." A tremble ran down the doctor's arms. "And that's what scares me." Lena stepped closer, clutching her daughter Emma tight. "Is it dangerous?" Vance shook his head. "No. If anything, it's terrified. See the hyperventilation? The curled posture? It's been through trauma." He paused. "And something else." He gently touched a small patch behind Snowdrop's shoulder. A faint scar was hidden under the thin fur, too clean, too precise, too intentional. Daniel stiffened. "What is that?" Vance hesitated before answering. "It's a cut from a removed tracking implant." Lena gasped. Daniel felt cold spread through him, even in the warm room. Vance continued quietly. Cartels do this. High-end traffickers, genetic smugglers, people with money in labs hidden under fake facilities. His voice faltered. Daniel, if something had a tracker cut out this cleanly, it wasn't a wild capture. It was owned. Daniel absorbed this with a tightening jaw. So someone was transporting it, he murmured. And someone else wanted it badly enough to force that truck off the road. Vance didn't deny it. Hunter suddenly stiffened, body locking like stone. His ears shot forward, his tail lowered. A sound, not a growl, but a cold vibration, rose in his chest. Dr. Vance paused. What's wrong with him? Before Daniel could answer, Hunter turned toward the frosted clinic window. The glass was fogged from the heat inside, but a silhouette, long, thin, unmoving, hovered on the other side. Not a face, not a full figure. Just the impression of someone standing inches from the glass, their outline distorted by the frost. Lena sucked in a breath. Vance's hand froze midair. Daniel reached for his firearm. Hunter gurgled another growl, deeper now, throat trembling. The dog's hackles rose in a sharp ridge along his spine, his muscles twitching with instinctive fear. Then, the silhouette disappeared. No footsteps, no sound, no trace except the slow melting of frost where it had stood. Snowdrop whimpered and pressed itself flat against the exam table, its tiny lungs fluttering like panic-made flesh. Vance pulled the blinds down with shaking hands. You need to leave. Now. We need supplies, Daniel said. Cloths, heat packs, anything you can give. Vance nodded quickly, grabbing gauze, thermal pads, a tiny oxygen mask meant for newborn puppies. His movements were frantic but focused. Then he stopped, gripping Daniel's wrist tightly. Listen to me, he said, voice trembling. Whatever was transported with this creature, whatever they removed that implant for, they will stop at nothing to get it back. We know, Daniel said. We saw footprints appear out of nowhere at the outpost. Vance's face drained of color. They're already here. He shoved a small metal box into Daniel's free hand. Take this. Don't open it until you reach somewhere safe. What's inside? Daniel asked. Proof, Vance whispered. And consequences. A loud crack hit the clinic's front door, something heavy, deliberate. Hunter's growl snapped into full alarm. Lena clutched Emma to her chest, tears forming in her eyes. They found us, she whispered. God, Daniel. They found us. The door rattled again. Wood splintered. Daniel stepped in front of everyone, his FBI stance snapping into place. We're going out the back. Vance grabbed his coat. I'm coming with you. No, Daniel said firmly. You stay. Lock the doors. Don't talk to anyone. Vance hesitated, but fear made him obey. He bolted the inner door and backed away as Daniel guided Lena toward the emergency exit. The storm roared outside. Hunter shoved his shoulder against the door, barking sharply, urgently, like he already knew what waited beyond the threshold. Daniel tightened his grip on Snowdrop, held Emma steady against his chest, and prepared to face whatever had followed them to this tiny clinic at the edge of the world. If you believe God still places protectors in the path of the lost and turns storms into miracles, please like, comment, and subscribe to Angels in Uniform. The back door slammed behind them as Daniel, Lena, Hunter, and the bundled infant pressed into the storm. Wind clawed at their clothes. Snow stung their faces like needles. The clinic lights flickered behind them, swallowed quickly by the white haze. Daniel adjusted Snowdrop inside his tactical jacket, feeling its fragile heartbeat flutter against him. It was weakening. The storm was worsening. And someone, Many someones were out there searching. Hunter pushed ahead, ears pinned backward, reading the storm the ways only a trained K9 could. His golden eyes darted sharply from drift to drift, his breath streaming out in controlled bursts as he assessed every threat. Lena trudged beside Daniel, holding Emma with both arms, her frail frame shaking violently from exhaustion and fear. They barely made it around the corner of the clinic when a shape lunged out of the snow. Daniel spun, firearm raised. But it wasn't an attacker. It was a woman. She collapsed forward, landing on her knees with a soft, broken groan. Snow clung to her hair, thin strands of gray and black tangled like seaweed. Her skin was ashen, her lips cracked from cold. She wore an oversized coat torn at the shoulder, the sleeve soaked with blood. And beneath it, Daniel glimpsed a plaid shirt and faded blue jeans. Her boots were mismatched, one old hiking boot and one sneaker, as if she'd escaped in a hurry. Her eyes, dark, sunken, wild, lifted to Daniel. She gasped, voice fractured like brittle glass. "Don't let them find the child." She swayed and fell forward into Hunter's path. The dog froze, then sniffed the air around her with a low, uncertain whine. Daniel crouched, helping her onto her side. "Ma'am, can you hear me? What's your name?" Her cracked lips trembled. "Mara," she whispered. "Mara Ellington." The name meant nothing to Daniel, but the fear in her eyes did. Her breathing hitched, each inhale a struggle. Yet she clung desperately to something in her hand. Daniel gently pried open her stiff fingers, a scrap of fabric, frayed, torn, stained with soot. Daniel's heart skipped. It was identical to the cloth wrapped around Snowdrop. Lena stumbled closer, pale. That's the same pattern. From the truck. That's the baby blanket," Daniel finished softly. Mara's eyes widened, and her trembling hand reached toward Daniel's jacket, toward Snowdrop. "Don't let them smell her," she rasped. "They'll track the scent through the storm." Her voice cracked into a coughing fit. Daniel steadied her shoulder. "Who's they, Mara? Who's coming?" Her gaze shifted over Daniel's shoulder, toward the clinic, toward the front windows. Daniel turned. Shapes, long dark silhouettes, moved in the swirling snow behind the glass, slow, deliberate, not stumbling like civilians in a blizzard. They glided like they knew exactly where to go. Hunter growled. It was a low sound, primal, vibrating like the storm itself. His hackles rose from neck to tail, a full-body warning. Daniel tightened his grip on his weapon. "We need to get Mara inside." But before he could lift her, she weakly gripped his sleeve. "No," she whispered, breath cold as the wind. "Not the clinic. They'll trap you in there. They're hurting you. They know the layout. They've done this before." Daniel stared at her. "That truck that crashed, were you in it?" Mara nodded weakly. "Driver, dead. They shot him. We veered off the ridge. I grabbed the child, ran. They hunted us through the snow. But I hid her. I hid her before they caught up." Daniel felt the weight of Snowdrop's tiny body pressing into him. "You hid this infant in the storm?" Mara nodded again. Then her eyes flickered with something like hope. "You found her, didn't you? She lived." Lena stepped forward, clutching Emma tighter. "Who were they chasing you for? What do they want?" Mara's lips trembled. "They don't want her dead. They want her back." She closed her eyes. "And they always take back what's theirs." Hunter suddenly lunged toward the darkness with a snarl. Not at the clinic, not at the silhouettes. He lunged toward snow-covered brush a few yards behind them, where nothing had moved. But then something did. A second silhouette rose behind the drift. Not tall, but wrong. Slender, inhuman angles beneath a long hooded coat. No face visible. Just darkness beneath the hood. Hunter barked ferociously, stepping in front of Lena and Emma like a shield. Snowdrop squirmed inside Daniel's jacket, crying out a soft, frightened sound that didn't belong to any species Daniel knew. And the hooded figure tilted its head, slowly, as if studying them. Then it lifted a hand, a single finger pointing directly at Snowdrop. Mara screamed, a raw, broken sound. "Run!" Daniel acted instantly. He hoisted Mara's weak body over one shoulder and grabbed Lena's arm. "We're moving now!" Lena staggered but nodded, her face ghost-pale under the storm. Hunter pushed ahead, barking in a controlled cadence. One bark forward, one bark sideways, guiding them toward the forest trail behind the clinic. The hooded figure did not chase. It simply lowered its hand. The other silhouettes behind the clinic windows faded away, melting back into the storm like ink dissolving in water. Mara kept whispering in Daniel's ear. "They don't need to chase. They know she's here. They're waiting for the right moment." "Why?" Daniel demanded. "Why her? What is she?" Mara looked at him with eyes full of terror and grief. "She isn't just a child," she said, voice trembling. "She's proof." Daniel frowned. "Proof of what?" "That they've crossed a line," Mara whispered. "A line nature shouldn't allow." Daniel remembered the metal box Dr. Vance shoved into his hands. Proof, consequences. Snowdrop let out a tiny, weak chirp. Hunter looked back, ears shifting, listening not to Snowdrop's sound, but to something underneath it. A resonance, a pulse. And Lena, pale and terrified, whispered, "Daniel, what if this isn't just about survival? What if she's the reason all this began?" They trudged deeper into the storm, Mara fading in and out of consciousness. The forest swallowed them. The clinic lights vanished. The silhouettes did not follow, but their presence clung to the air like a warning. Daniel held Snowdrop tighter, whispering, "I've got you. I won't let anyone take you." Mara's voice cracked one last time before she collapsed fully against him. "You don't understand," she breathed. "They already have." Daniel's heart froze, but the storm didn't pause, and neither could he. If you believe God places his warriors, even in storms of fear and shadow, please like, comment, and subscribe to Angels in Uniform. The sirens arrived minutes after the last shadow melted into the storm. Red and blue strobes pulsed across the snow, spilling color onto the forest like fractured shards of stained glass. Daniel lowered Mara gently onto a rescue blanket, while Lena rocked little Emma, shielding the infant from the wind. Hunter paced in tight circles beside Daniel, snow dusting the fur along his back like silver armor. Local officers hurried toward them. The lead responder, Deputy Sarah Linden, was a tall, lean woman in her early 40s with sharp cheekbones and warm brown skin. Her black hair was tied back in a no-nonsense braid, and snow clung to her heavy-duty patrol jacket. She moved with the quiet authority of someone who had seen too many strange nights in this mountain town. "Agent Cross?" she asked, brow furrowed with concern. "Dispatch said you had hostiles on scene?" Daniel nodded, voice tight. "Trained. Well-equipped. They knew exactly what they were here for." Sarah glanced toward the tree line where the shadows had vanished. A flicker of unease tightened her posture. "Storm wiped out our comms an hour ago. You're lucky you're still in one piece." Her eyes fell to the tiny bundle inside Daniel's coat. "What? Is that a puppy?" Daniel hesitated. "I don't know." Snowdrop stirred slightly as if reacting to the question. lifting one trembling paw. Sarah blinked. That's not a puppy. Before Daniel could answer, Mara regained consciousness with a violent cough. Snow flecked her lashes as she tried to sit up, but her injuries made it nearly impossible. Sarah knelt beside her, examining the cuts and bruises on her arms. "Mum, don't move. Medical's on the way." Mara shook her head, gripping Sarah's wrist with a desperation that tightened her whole body. "No, not yet. I need to speak to him." Her gaze found Daniel. Her eyes were glassy, frightened, and impossibly tired, like someone who had been running from monsters long before the storm began. "Bring her closer," Mara whispered. Daniel stepped forward, opening his coat enough to reveal Snowdrop nestled in the warmth of his chest. The creature blinked up at Mara, its round dark eyes shimmering with a fragile, almost human sorrow. Mara broke into sobs. "That's her," she choked out. "That's the one they want." Daniel knelt beside her. "Mara, what is she?" Mara swallowed hard. "Not an animal, not something to be owned. She's a rare—" She paused, searching for breath. "A rare kind of living code, a genetic anomaly they discovered overseas, a hybrid born out of illegal experiments, not meant to exist." Sarah's face paled. "You're telling me those men were from a trafficking unit?" Mara nodded weakly. "Not traffickers, hunters. Men paid to retrieve anything the world isn't ready to see." Daniel's hand tightened around the coat shielding Snowdrop. "And you were hiding her?" "I was trying to get her to someone who could protect her," Mara whispered. "But the storm, the crash..." Her eyes filled with pain. "I thought I could trust the others in the vehicle, but someone betrayed us. I barely got her out before they found us." Snowdrop whimpered, a faint, broken note that quivered like the cry of a frightened child. Mara touched Daniel's arm. "She chose you." Daniel froze. "What do you mean?" Mara looked at him with a trembling reverence. "These creatures don't bond with just anyone. They cling to the first soul they sense is strong enough, gentle enough, to save them. When she grabbed your sleeve in the snow, she made her choice." Snowdrop pressed her tiny head into Daniel's chest, as if confirming the statement. Daniel's throat tightened. "I'm no savior." "You don't have to be," Mara whispered. "You just have to care." Hunter stepped between them, lowering his head to sniff Snowdrop. His golden brown eyes softened. Without hesitation, Hunter lay down beside Daniel and Snowdrop, curling protectively around them both. Sarah watched the scene, stunned. I've never seen a trained canine do that with anything except a child. Daniel exhaled shakily. She's been making these sounds, little cries. But earlier tonight she made one that... His voice faltered. It sounded like my daughter. Lena placed a hand on his shoulder, eyes soft with empathy. Maybe she senses your grief. Daniel looked down at Snowdrop, whose frail body rose and fell against his heartbeat. He didn't believe in coincidences anymore. Snowdrop lifted her tiny face toward Daniel. Her eyes shimmered. And then, barely audible over the wind, "Stay!" It was not a cry, not an echo, not imagination. A whisper shaped like a word Daniel had not heard spoken in years, spoken last by the daughter he buried beneath a maple tree behind their old home. Deputy Sarah gasped and covered her mouth. Lena stepped backward in shock. Even Hunter stiffened, ears pricking forward sharply. Daniel's world stopped. Snowdrop reached out with a trembling paw, pressing it against his jaw as if she recognized the ache behind his silence. Mara whispered, awe-stricken, "She remembers. These creatures. They imprint memories. echo emotions they feel. She must have sensed your loss. But Daniel, hands shaking, breath unsteady, felt something else. The whisper didn't feel copied. It felt meant. The rescue team loaded Mara onto a stretcher, covering her with heated blankets. Daniel stayed beside Snowdrop, refusing to hand her to anyone else, not even for a moment. Sarah walked beside him as they moved toward the ambulances. "We'll take you all to the station," she said gently. "You're safer there." Daniel didn't look at her. His eyes stayed on the small creature curled against him. "No station is safe if those men want her," he said. "We need federal protection." "Your federal protection?" Sarah replied softly. He almost smiled at that. Almost. But Snowdrop shivered suddenly, burrowing deeper into his chest. Her body trembled, and Daniel lifted her closer. "It's okay," he whispered. Snowdrop answered with a broken chirp, and Hunter pressed his head into Daniel's leg, as though promising he would never leave. For the first time in years, in the middle of a storm meant to bury them all, Daniel felt something warm in his chest. Something like purpose returning from the dead. The ambulance lights washed over them, turning the snow into shimmering halos. Snowdrop's eyes reflected the glow. Two small lanterns of life in a world gone cold. Daniel tightened his coat around her. "This isn't the end," he murmured. "This is just the beginning." Snowdrop blinked slowly and nestled into his heartbeat. If you believe God sends the smallest, most fragile lives to remind us of his miracles, please like, comment, and subscribe to Angels in Uniform. The forest swallowed them whole. The wind screamed through the pines, dragging ribbons of snow across the ground like ghostly fingers. Daniel tightened his arms around Snowdrop, feeling the tiny creature's tremors deepen with every gust. Lena struggled behind him, her breath thin and ragged as she clutched Emma against her chest. Mara Ellington lay half-conscious across Daniel's other shoulder, her skin cold and pale under the moonless sky. Hunter moved ahead, his silhouette a dark, powerful force cutting through the storm. They had barely put distance between themselves and the clinic when the world changed. The distant hum of generators powering the town flickered, then died. A sudden silence swept over the valley. The lights of Silver Ridge disappeared all at once, leaving only darkness. Daniel stopped cold. Power outage? Lena shook her head slowly. No storm has ever knocked everything out in one moment. Hunter's ears flicked. He turned abruptly toward the ridge behind them, back arched, tail stiff. Daniel felt his stomach drop. Footsteps, not one pair, not fast, not rushing. Slow, measured, in perfect unison, the kind of footsteps only trained men produced. Mara stirred weakly, her cracked voice trembling. "They're here." Daniel clenched his jaw. "Keep moving." But before he could take another step, Hunter blocked his path, standing broad and solid in the snow, his body forming a shield between Daniel's group and the danger creeping toward them. Then, from the drifting dark, shadows began to take shape. Not close enough to see faces, not far enough to dismiss, men, 5, maybe 6, emerged in a staggered semicircle. They wore heavy winter gear, but not the bulky kind civilians used. Their silhouettes were wrong, too streamlined, movements too controlled. Their coats looked reinforced with tactical padding. Their boots sank into the snow with silent efficiency. Their faces remained hidden behind black snow masks and mirrored goggles that reflected Daniel's flashlight like soulless stars. They spoke nothing, did nothing. Just tightened the noose of shadows around Daniel and the women. Mara's fingers dug into Daniel's coat. Don't let them near her." Snowdrop pressed deeper into Daniel's chest, emitting a tiny crackling whimper, half cry, half heartbeat. The nearest masked man lifted a hand, calm and steady, like a teacher instructing a stubborn student. "Give it back," the man said. Low, unaccented, controlled, too controlled. "It does not belong to your kind." Lena gasped. Daniel stepped forward, hands shaking from cold and fury. "Identify yourselves." The man said nothing. Daniel raised his badge-bearing hand. "FBI, you're surrounding a federal officer. Take one more step and—" "We won't take a step," the man interrupted quietly. "Because you will bring it to us." Daniel tightened his grip on Snowdrop. "She's a baby." "Not a baby," the man countered. "A key." Mara began crying softly behind him, whispering, They know what she is." Snowdrop let out a small, terrified chirp, the same fragile sound it made the night Daniel found it on the mountainside. But this time, the sound was different, sharper, echoing through the trees with an unnatural resonance. Hunter reacted instantly, his head jerked toward Snowdrop, his ears flattened. And then, with a deep, guttural snarl Daniel had never heard from him, not even in combat, Hunter stepped forward until he stood between Daniel and the masked men. His stance was unmistakable. He would die before letting them through. Snowdrop wriggled out a trembling paw from inside Daniel's jacket and reached toward Hunter, its tiny claws brushing the dog's cheek. The moment they touched, Hunter froze. Then something impossible happened. Hunter's breathing changed, slow, deep, focused, as if he were hearing something Daniel could not. His pupils dilated. Snow stuck to his fur like glittering frost. He slowly lifted his head toward Daniel, not with fear, but with recognition. Snowdrop made another sound, not a cry, not a whimper, a note, a tone too perfect to be natural, too sorrowful to be synthetic. Lena covered her mouth in shock. "Daniel, she's talking to him." Hunter's tail lowered. His muscles tightened with a new purpose Daniel had never seen in him. The dog pressed his nose gently to Snowdrop's head, like greeting a long-lost sibling. The masked men in the woods reacted. One stepped back. Two others stiffened. The leader hissed under his breath, "It's bonding. Get it now." Daniel raised his gun. "Over my dead body." The leader tilted his head. "If necessary." Hunter barked, sharp, explosive, commanding, the kind of bark that signaled imminent threat. Then chaos ripped open the night. Two of the masked men lunged forward through the snow. Hunter charged, teeth bared, his powerful legs propelling him through the drifts like a missile. He collided with the first man, knocking him off balance, driving him into the ground with force that echoed like a gunshot against the trees. Daniel fired a warning shot into the air. The masked men flinched, momentarily disoriented. "Move!" Daniel shouted. Lena stumbled forward, clutching Emma. Mara tried to lift her head, but she was too weak, barely hanging onto Daniel's shoulder. Snowdrop clung to Daniel's shirt, its tiny heartbeat fluttering like a trapped bird. Hunter dodged a swinging baton and lunged again, snarling with righteous fury. Snow flew in arcs around him as he fought with the precision of every KB-9 drill he had ever endured. But there was something new in him, too. A fire, a purpose, a primal promise to something small and trembling inside Daniel's jacket. The masked men hesitated, watching Hunter as if they were witnessing something unexpected, something that complicated their mission. "Grab the child," the leader snapped. But the men closest to Hunter didn't move. They couldn't. Hunter blocked every angle. His snarls echoed like thunder in a hollowed-out sky. Then, without warning, the leader pressed two fingers to his earpiece. A pause. A moment. Then he spoke again. Fall back. The men froze, confused, then obeyed. The leader's mirrored goggles turned toward Daniel, reflecting back the trembling infant in his arms. This is not finished, he said calmly. You can't protect it forever. They melted into the storm, one by one, until only their footprints remained, deep, sharp, and leading into darkness. Daniel exhaled shakily. Hunter, good boy. Good boy. Hunter trotted back, panting, eyes still burning with adrenaline. Snowdrop reached toward him again. He lowered his head to nuzzle her gently. Lena whispered, Daniel, they weren't normal criminals. Daniel nodded grimly. No, and this isn't just a missing child case. He looked down at Snowdrop, whose big, glassy eyes stared up at him with trust so pure, it twisted something deep in his chest. No matter what they say, Daniel murmured, she's ours to protect. Snowdrop gave a tiny chirp, almost like agreement. The snowstorm howled on, but the night had changed. If you believe God sends protectors, both human and animal, to guard the innocent in their darkest nights, please like, comment, and subscribe to Angels in Uniform. Sometimes the smallest lives cross our path not by chance, but by design. Tonight's story is a reminder that miracles often arrive quietly, wrapped in fear, sorrow, or uncertainty. Yet they always carry a purpose, to lead us back toward faith, compassion, and the promise that God is still moving in our lives. If you have ever felt abandoned, unnoticed, or forgotten, remember this. God sends help in forms we do not expect, through people and moments we rarely see coming. His protection surrounds us, even in our darkest storms, guiding our steps when we can no longer guide ourselves. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who may need hope today. Leave a comment, subscribe to Angels in Uniform, and stand with us as we tell the stories that remind the world that goodness is still alive. May God watch over you, bless your home, and walk with you through every storm you face.